Good afternoon and welcome to this WIOA Summit 2022 breakout session. My name is Tara Schwab with the Southern Illinois Professional Development Center, and I will be one of the moderators along with Kirsten Baird from ICSPS. Today's session topic is Leading in Times of Crisis, a balancing act between accountability, empathy, and fairness. As a reminder, we ask that all participants on this session have their audio on mute, and we ask that you do not unmute yourselves unless prompted to unmute. If you have questions as the session proceeds, please post it in the Whova Q&A app. So not in the Zoom, but in the Whova app, please. So if you feel comfortable, virtual people, we encourage you to engage with the presenters by putting your cameras on. Following the conference, the Whova app will host all conference recordings and resources. To be as accessible as possible, this webinar will be offering closed captioning. With that, we will get started. So I'll pass it off to you, Jacqueline. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for helping out with that. So welcome to the first breakout session of the summit. I'm very excited to be here. Make sure you're in the right workshop. So this workshop began for me when I was in a doctoral program. We just finished it at National Lewis, and I was taking a course this time last year on leadership in times of crisis. And we could pick something that was a struggle for us in crisis. And for me, it was trying to figure out how to accommodate folks' individual circumstances while still being fair to others. And so this question of accountability, we're accountable to our funders, to our institution, and empathy and fairness and equity to others really was a struggle for me. So that's the genesis of this workshop. So my name is Jacqueline Lynch. I'm the Dean of Adult Ed at Triton College. I've been in my position almost 6 years. I've been in adult ed since 1989. And this is where I will live and breathe until retirement day, I think. Adult ed is very near and dear to me as an immigrant, but as an English-speaking immigrant, I had a lot of advantages that others didn't have. So our agenda today, we'll talk about what we've been through in the last couple of years. We'll talk about leading in times of crisis, and then we'll have an activity on this balancing act. We'll wrap up, and I'll share a lot of references and resources with you. So I know you've probably seen these. These are called a rock cairn or a rock cairn, depending on what part of the world you're in. In Wales, they call them rock cairns. But they really defy the laws of gravity. And when you think of what we've done in the last 2 years, and we've been successful to varying degrees, that also defies logic. Gravity, logic, we've been in a constant state of balancing things for the last few years. So as a leader, we've had to manage our funders and our staff, and then we've had to manage this empathy question and fairness, and all the while trying to maintain our own sanity. So just a couple of quotes here. A long time ago, Henry Kissinger said, "There cannot be another crisis next week because my schedule is full." And I found this quote, since 2022, we faced an absolute onslaught of challenges that would otherwise have been major news for a whole year, only to have them recede into our memory after the next outrageous development. So, in the last 2 years, we've had all these challenges here on the left-hand side, and we've had to try to maintain our sanity and support our staff and students and clients and customers. I know we all use different terms for what we call students. So if I talk about students, you can just translate that into your customers or your clients. So we've had so much going on the last couple of years. So when everything changed really was when the pandemic hit 2 years ago, and it created massive challenges for us as leaders, for employers, as practitioners, as service providers. So if you could real quickly just share very briefly, some of the challenges, some of your challenges. I didn't do a spell check before I posted this. And remember that, don't change your terminology. If you have clients, we'll take it to mean customers or students. So if you want to just take 1 minute And Tara, I obviously won't see that, but if you want to share some of the challenges.
And we're going to encourage everybody to put questions and answers into the Hooba chat. So, Jacqueline, we have Abby Cox said the fear of COVID, professional remote engagement, balancing work from home needs with customer needs. We have some people in the room here live with me who are typing as well. We have staffing issues, changing expectations, sometimes daily.
Yes.
Learning new job and meeting new coworkers in a remote environment.
Yes.
On
Okay. So you can continue to add them. But really, as leaders, we have been forced to rethink how we support our staff, how we support our employees, how we support our clients, customers, and students. Technology was a huge thing. We had to pivot to an online environment. So we ourselves, as well as our staff and our students and clients and customers, had to adopt new technologies. Putting technologies into someone's hand doesn't mean that they can use it. So technical skills were also very much in need and not always present in our student base or in our customer base, who are coming from environments where they haven't had the opportunity to develop those skills. We also were forced to, think about the emotional well-being of our employees. Just like us, we worried about the health of our family and long distance from family members. We were concerned about their emotional well-being. They were apprehensive, and they were fearful of what the future of work would be, what the future for their family, and having a job and having employment and having a house. Those were all significant worries and concerns for us and for our employees. And then leaders were also tested in ways that we really have never been tested before. We were walking in uncharted waters. We were making things up as we were going along. We were making guesses, even though they were educated guesses. And we had to be comfortable saying, I don't know right now, but this may change. So it's been, everything was upended and has been really difficult. So I found this graphic a couple of, probably close to the beginning of COVID. And it talks about the different zones. It says, where do you want to be during COVID? I changed it to where do I want to be during a crisis? Do I want to be in the fear zone, the learning zone, or the growth zone? So as I share some of the characteristics of each of these zones, think to yourself, where did you fall 2 years ago? And which zone are you in now? So in this fear zone, it's the time when we were, buying up all that toilet paper. We were getting emails from people and we were forwarding those emails right away. We were complaining that we were at home and we couldn't go out. So that was the fear zone. The learning zone then is when we started to say, I'm afraid of this. I don't know what's going to happen. And you're identifying your position, your emotions. You become more aware of the situation and you're starting to think awareness has to come before action. So you're thinking, what should I do next? You stop compulsively consuming what hurts me, right? We all did a lot of baking in the beginning. We did a lot of eating sweets. We were constantly watching TV. We started to give up control of what you couldn't control. And these were all in the learning zone. Then to move into the growth zone, that took another period of time and a skill set. And this is when we started to live in the present but focus on the future. It's when we started to be empathetic with ourselves and with others. We tried to stay happy and be hopeful that things would change and be better. We started to practice quietude, patience, relationships, and creativity. I like that word quietude. I hadn't heard it before. So starting thinking of a big picture. So think where you were 2 years ago and where you are now. Hopefully everybody has moved from the left towards the right. So here's a reflection question. How did you move from one zone to the next? What was the thing that moved you from the fear zone, buying up the food and the medications that you thought you would need, to the point where you are now focusing on the living in the present and focusing on the future? You're more empathetic with others. So it's kind of, you're taking your own, it's time to take the temperature. When I post this, there'll be a lot of references in here. So the reference for this is down on the right-hand side here. So some of the professional and personal challenges we faced, obviously sheltering in place was led to a lot of social isolation for us and for our students. Students who and us who did not live near family members. My family is in Ireland, and it was a constant worry. What happens if they get it? We were anxious about the safety of our loved ones. We were concerned that we would get sick or others would get sick and die. For those of us with kids, we became homeschool teachers, and that in itself was a brand new set of challenges and an opportunity to develop patience. A lot of us became caretakers. We weren't sure how long this pandemic was going to last. I mean, we're two years plus into it, and 2 years ago, would we honestly have thought that we were going to still be talking about COVID 2 years later? And then for many of us and for those we serve, they were worried about income. Right? Or was their job stable? Was their housing stable? And overall economic recovery. So there have been a lot of professional and personal challenges faced everywhere. So pivoting to working remotely and servicing our customers virtually was very, very stressful. We closed here on a Monday night, and by the following a week and a half later, we were fully online. So we had to make a lot of decisions quickly. We really had to get into this transformative mode. We had to be adaptive. We had to change our attitude, our morals, and our beliefs. We had to change a lot of processes. We had to look at new approaches. We had to do research, but when we didn't have time to figure out the research, we kind of went by our guts, and basically everything we did was a new way of doing business. And again, this digital divide, that does not only affect our students and our customers, that also affects our staff. Not everybody has the technology skills or access to technology at home, so that working at home was easy, or servicing students was easy. So these are all the challenges that we, and others that we have faced. So one of the quotes I found, effective leadership in the face of wicked problems calls for a very different set of virtues than those traditionally associated with strong leadership. Right? So hopefully in our positions, we are all considered strong leaders. But in this space of these wicked problems, and wicked problems are defined, they're difficult to define, and they're delineated from other and bigger problems because they're more difficult to overcome. Their consequences are far reaching, and they have significant impact on multiple areas and fronts. So there's nobody that wouldn't say what we went through in the last 2 years wasn't a wicked problem. So a different set of skills that are needed, traditionally needed for strong leadership. These virtues include confidence and humility, decisiveness and curiosity, honesty and empathy, courage and patience. So there's a lot in here. And if we didn't have this, we had to fake it till we make it, or we had to develop these characteristics in order to be able to function. So this presentation is going to focus mostly on empathy and accountability and the perception of fairness. So what is empathy? There are a lot of different definitions out there for empathy, understanding others, putting yourself in their shoes. This last one, I think, is probably the one that means the most to me. Empathy is attempting to understand the perspective of another, by personalizing his or her narrative to myself, to me. In essence, it is putting myself in someone else's shoes. So now there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is the feeling that I care about someone and I'm sorry that they're having this grief or misfortune. But empathy is when I feel that I understand and share their experience or my emotion or their emotions, and I attempt to understand what it's like in their shoes, the ability to share someone else's feelings. There's a cute little video here that explains the difference between the two. When you get the video, the PowerPoint, you can click on that. So why does empathetic leadership matter? What is all this about? So empathetic leaders are, and we all exhibit different levels of empathy, obviously, in our daily work and in our family life and we'll talk about how we demonstrate empathy a little bit later. But people need to feel support and understanding in all aspects of life, work, home, recreation, our family, friends. At work, people will usually turn to coworkers for empathy because family members are not in that situation. So sometimes you go home from work and people don't understand what you've been through during that day. In times of uncertainty and crisis, relationship building is really important because you are leading in unknown times, and those who you are leading need to trust that you know what you're doing, or that you have their best interest. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're acting in their best interest, and you'll be honest and you'll tell them, I don't know it all. We're still trying to figure it out. When faculty, staff and faculty for us, but when employees in general feel like they have been heard and you understand where they come from, it really leads to a more democratic environment. You are more perspective seeking. So you're asking and sensing and seeking their perspective, and you're trying to understand it. And you're a more effective leader when you understand what your followers are feeling. Leader empathy, and this is a very interesting one. The research says that empathy demonstrated by a leader results in increased follower performance. So better job performance, better job satisfaction, and better innovation when a leader demonstrates empathy. So there's a higher level of commitment to the job, a commitment to peers, when you demonstrate empathy. And I'm sure there's nothing here that people, really disagree with, but I just want to kind of put the lay of the land out there before we talk about some additional things here. So empathetic leaders, what does an empathetic leader do? Well, first of all, listening. And in times of crisis, you think you have the answer, and sometimes you feel like you don't have the time to listen, and someone asks a question or comes with a story, and you kind of want to say, just cut to the chase, and because I have 4 things here on my list I got to do in the next 5 minutes. But empathetic leaders always listen and avail of any opportunities they have to ask how their staff are doing, how you can help. Now, how you can help, I can't help you find housing. I can't help you come up with $10,000 to pay a medical bill. But by listening and asking, you are demonstrating empathy and maybe helping them to problem solve. You're fully present when you have conversations with your employees, right? You may be in the middle of something, somebody walks in the door, and you really don't have the time to work with that employee on something. So not doing it is better than doing it and being distracted and being disconnected from the conversation. Empathetic leaders also create bonds by showing that they matter and they're flexible and they're understanding, while maintaining accountability. So empathy doesn't mean that you give all the accommodations in the world and you lose the accountability and the responsibility to answer to funders and to the institution. And there's a way to do that. And that is, and we'll talk about that, but it's a lot to do with communication. So another important piece here about empathetic leaders. So as a leader, when you demonstrate empathy to faculty and staff, you are modeling the behavior that you want them in turn to demonstrate to clients, to students, to customers. So they feel supported and they feel empowered to demonstrate empathy to those that we serve. So you're modeling, but you're also giving them permission to, this is how you behave. So you spend extra time with that student. You don't get to that phone call or you don't get to that report until later because the student needs something first. Empathy and follower performance. There was a lot of research done on this. Job satisfaction increases, feelings of security. People feel their jobs are more secure when somebody demonstrates empathy. They're also more likely to innovate. So we're trying to pivot to virtual advising. We're trying to pivot to virtual submission, let's say, of reimbursements, and we're trying to figure it out. So people are more likely to think ways through those challenging times when they feel like they are being supported and feel there is empathy towards their circumstances. When leaders demonstrate empathy, there's a powerful bond that encourages and sustains followers and endeavors needed to improve workplace performance. So something pretty similar. And here's this model thing. So modeling of how a leader understands and supports improves follower behavior and their affective states. So mentally, their affective state, their mood, their motivation is impacted when supervisors, when leaders demonstrate empathy. So there is a direct link between empathetic leadership and employee and job performance. So empathy and fairness. So this is really kind of the root of where I struggled, right? So empathetic treatment can include work allocations, right? If somebody needs a special accommodation, I take some of their work and I give it to somebody else. Exceptions to policies and procedures, somebody needs to work from home, scheduling that they work half a day or 3 days on, 2 days off. So there's a lot of different ways to provide accommodations with that empathetic treatment. But how that empathetic treatment is received and perceived by others is often very difficult to determine. So empathy, the lens of empathy, is what determines the perceived fairness of that preferential treatment. So I have employee A and employee B. And employee A gets an accommodation or empathetic treatment to work 4 days a week instead of 5. Now, if employee B hasn't asked for that and needs that, that person may perceive that to be unfair, but they didn't ask for it, so it's kind of hard to give somebody something they don't ask for. They also may not, the relationship between employee and employee B may not be optimal, and so that person may have not a grudge, but may not be as empathetic towards that person. So that's perceived fairness accounts for the effectiveness of empathy and preferential treatment. When I provide an empathetic treatment or an accommodation to somebody, another employee may perceive it on this continuum of either preferential treatment, favoritism, unfairness, or it may go all the way to inequity. And when one person perceives favoritism or any one of these little circles on the Venn diagram, then that negatively impacts their performance. It negatively impacts their reaction to the person who got the accommodation. And interestingly, people are more prone to notice inequity that disadvantages themselves. So if it doesn't affect me, and if an employee needs a bus pass and I don't take a bus, I drive to work every day, and this employee gets a bus pass, it doesn't disadvantage me in any way, so I'm less likely to notice inequity. So here is an opportunity for you to reflect. What does this mean in your role and for you? Are your staff members likely to regard equity or need as the appropriate and fair norm to distribute empathetic treatment in task and work contexts? So when you think about your own department or your own company or your own work unit, those you supervise, are they more likely to say, yes, employee B really needs this help with a bus pass, and I think, you know, that's fair? Or is that person more likely to say, that person got a bus pass, but I'm not going to get help. I'm not getting any help with gas, and look at the price of gas. So is it an equity or a need lens that your employees are going to view this empathetic treatment through? A lot of it will be how well you know your employees. You may be able to determine that someone will have an equity lens or a needs lens based on what you know. But once you're aware of these things, you will become more attuned to how it exhibits itself in the workplace. Obviously, the sense of favoritism or unfairness towards any group member is going to impact people's affective state and their motivation. So a big question in the research is empathy socially biased? It is narrow in its scope. It is not quantifiable. There are some who say it is subject to bias. There are others who say it is biased. And some important questions that come up are we more likely to demonstrate empathy to those who we like, or to those who are like us, or to those who like us? So are there certain populations that we are more likely to demonstrate empathy towards, therefore preventing equal investment in everybody's well-being? So what that means is, if somebody is a white female from Ireland, am I more likely to, that person's like me, am I more likely to demonstrate empathy towards that person than somebody who is from Canada, or Mexico, or wherever, that has nothing, that is not like me? So those who we like, those who like us, or those who are like us. So when thinking about empathy, think about these things. And again, as you now are aware that this is a thing, you can kind of be more cognizant of how that happens in your life. Empathy-based preferential treatment can be tantamount to a violation of equity in group contexts. So as a group, if I am only demonstrating equity towards particular, we have a large Mexican staff, only towards Mexican, then do other groups feel, well, they're the ones who only get preferential treatment? Equity is a hallmark of fairness in many group settings and is essential to fostering the motivation and commitment of group members. So the teams are going to be split apart if there is a perception of unfairness, inequity, and all these little circles here. So again, an opportunity to reflect. What does this mean for me? So what are the consequences in my department and my team when I demonstrate empathetic feelings or empathetic treatment towards a distressed group member? Is the group going to view this as from a needs lens or from an equity lens? And how are the group dynamics affected? So as you think of making accommodations in the workplace for different reasons, ask yourself these questions. How will the group dynamics be affected? Tara, how are we doing for time?
We are at 1:33 right now.
And it's 1 hour, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome,
Going
thank
great.
you. So as I looked at this, there is a theory called equity theory. It makes a lot of sense to bring this in here. So every employee brings something to the workplace. These are the job inputs. They also get something from the workplace. So what I bring to my job, effort, loyalty, hard work, commitment, flexibility, my heart and soul, support of colleagues, personal sacrifice, that is what I input. That's what I give to my job. And in return, I get financial rewards. I get a salary, right? I get a pension. I get benefits. There are also a lot of intangibles that I get. Recognition, reputation, praise and thanks, training, development, sense of achievement, advancement, promotion. So these are just some examples. Now, when an employee's inputs and outputs are balanced, that's when they perceive equity. And people need to feel like there is a fair balance between what I give to the job, the inputs, and the outputs. And crucial, really important to this, fairness is measured by comparing one's own balance between input and output with the ratio enjoyed by others. So I, as an individual, I will look at this by comparing my inputs and outputs and saying, yeah, I'm in balance. I work really hard. Maybe I don't get paid enough, but I really love my job, so I'm going to stick with it. But then I look at somebody else and I compare my ratio to their ratio, and that's how I sense equity or inequity. So I put this graphic together. I hope it illustrates a little bit better. So job inputs, I bring my education, commitment, my skills and ability to my job. The output I get, obviously I get financial rewards. I get a great sense of achievement and feeling valued. So we are, as human beings, we are constantly assessing the return we get for the investment we put into our organization. We're constantly, now we're not doing this consciously, it's happening, it's just happening beneath it. And every so often, we think, oh, I'm working too hard and this is so much, and then we start to assess. But this is happening organically. Now, when employees feel like they are being dealt with inequitably or unfairly, this theory helps us to predict what they will do, how they will act to restore the feeling of equity. So the equity theory says, if I feel like the inputs I'm giving are higher than my outputs, I'm going to do something to fix that balance. So I want to restore that equilibrium. Significant implications if we're in a time of crisis, right? Because we don't always get that sense of achievement. We don't always get that sense of value because we're loaded with work. So now we are in an imbalanced state. How are we going to rectify that? Well, an employee may produce lower quality work. You know what? They don't care about me. I'll just do the minimum and I'll leave at 5 o'clock. Maybe the employee may seek to increase outcomes. Maybe I ask for more money. Maybe I ask for a promotion. Maybe I give some of my work to others. So I don't want to do this piece of my work anymore. You do it because you do less than me. Maybe I ask others. This is where it gets dangerous. Maybe I ask others to reduce their productivity. Okay, so I'm not appreciated here. I'm going to work less. So I'm going to ask you to work less too, so it won't be obvious that I'm working less. And then obviously the biggest consequence is leaving their job. So these are the options an employee can take to restore that equity. For the employer, the best option is to increase that outputs. And we're not talking about financial outputs here. We're talking about any of these other, where is it? Any of these. Offer somebody additional training, offer somebody praise and thanks, acknowledgement, recognition. All of these things go towards a sense of, these are outputs and a sense of satisfaction in the job. So the goal is when something is off kilter like this, we need to balance it again. So when we think about equity, and empathetic treatment, we are really stymied by our accountability to, we can't allow everybody to work half days, part days, piecemeal days, and still maintain accountability to our funders. So our definition for accountability is being responsible for what you do, being able to give a satisfactory reason for what you do, or the degree to which it happens. Who are we accountable to? We're all accountable to someone. These are some that we are in the education world are particularly accountable to: the institution, our funders, students, external stakeholders, our teams. You all will have different folks that you're accountable to. And what are we accountable for? Well, number one, we're accountable for our outcomes. We're here to do something. Are we doing that? Are we meeting our grant targets? Are we meeting targets from the institution? We are accountable for how our money is spent. And then we're also, very importantly, we're responsible for providing a high quality experience to those we serve. So we can have the best outcomes in the world, but our customers not have a good experience, and it's not sustainable. So accountability is that thing that hangs over us the whole time as we do our work. We have quarterly reports, we have monthly financials, we have monthly board meetings, and whatever, we have annual grant renewals. But accountability is right in front of us every single day. So what is the role of accountability in moderating the impact of empathy on preferential treatment? Because accountability exerts a strong influence on decision makers, right? I want to give everybody, 50% raise. They all worked really, really hard throughout COVID. I can't do that. I don't have the money to do that. There's an equity issue within the institution. So accountability is a strong influence on decision making. And since there is a great variation in the extent to which accountability pressures are absent or present in most group contexts. So the accountability pressures that I have will change according to the time of year. The accountability pressures you have will change depending on your circumstances, finances, funding. But then the bigger question is, how does accountability impact your ability to demonstrate empathy and to give people preferential or empathetic treatment? So I'm presenting a lot of questions here. I know it's not about answers. It's about being aware of what the research is, what the thoughts are out there. And then once you're at that aware stage, you can start acting on some of that awareness. So there's not a lot of answers here, if that's what you came looking for. So another opportunity to reflect. So what does this mean for me? How do I balance empathy and fairness in work and group contexts? How do you? How do accountability expectations factor into my decisions to provide empathetic treatment? We know they factor in there, but how do they? So these are some things to think about. So here we find ourselves with this cairn that defies gravity. We are, as a leader, balancing accountability, empathy, fairness, and our staff. So let's see if we can figure out, using some of the information that I've shared, figure out how to solve this activity. So, well, not a solve. We'll think about it. So here's a case, a completely fictitious case. You lead a department of 40 plus staff, 3 of whom report directly to you. Your department has seen a significant decrease in enrollment. So you put your own word in there: enrollment, in service providing, in revenue, or whatever it is, since 2020. Hilda has been working as an administrative assistant in the department for over 10 years. She works primarily on pre-enrollment processes. She is multilingual and she works extremely well with students. Students love to talk to Hilda. But Hilda's English proficiency and technology skills significantly impact her productivity. She often has to ask others to help her perform routine tasks, and she's really not someone that her supervisors can reach out to if they're looking for detailed, time-sensitive tasks to be completed. Grace has been with the department less than a year, and she has come to be the go-to person for anything tech-related. She's talented, innovative, focused. She's supportive of her colleagues, especially Hilda. She's always helping Hilda. So Grace and Hilda both have kids in the local elementary school. So in March 2020, when campus closed, Grace pivoted to remote work without a hitch, while Hilda struggled to provide even the most basic support to her supervisor from a distance. When the college staggered reopening in the fall, Hilda was one of the first to be recalled because of her productivity issues. Grace continued to work effectively from home, and she only was required to be on campus 2 days a week. Now, yesterday, Hilda came in my office and she was upset. She shared that her mother could no longer stay with her children as she needed to care for a sick relative. I would like to work remotely again like Grace does. You know that Hilda's productivity will plummet if she works from home. You're under a lot of pressure to increase enrollment, both from the institution and the funder. And Hilda is heavily involved in the enrollment pipeline process. You reach out to HR, who indicates that each department is allowed to make remote work decisions based on the department and employee needs. So now we're going to break out, and we're going to talk about this for 15 minutes. And these are the questions you're going to answer. How will you balance accountability to the institution and the funder with your desire to be empathetic towards Hilda? Think about the questions that we presented. What are the consequences of demonstrating empathetic feelings towards Hilda? And what might the perception of fairness be? And how might group dynamics be affected? So I think, Kristen, you have post. Yep.
I'm sorry, I don't believe we have the full capability to do breakout rooms within Huva.
Oh, we don't?
I do not believe so. And we
Okay, I probably should have asked that. Okay.
But we can do a discussion.
Okay, let's try that then. Let's try that then. Is the activity posted?
It is, yes.
Okay, so can you direct them to find it?
Yes, so the virtual handouts can be found under Huva, under Jacqueline's session.
So I'll put it up again then. And let me see, share. So first of all, I guess the question is there anything else you need to know before you start thinking about Hilda's request, her accommodation request? Nothing else?
And Jacqueline, do you want them to be able to unmute themselves?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, feel free to unmute yourself and talk freely if you'd like.
Working on posting it in the chat as well. There you go.
Okay. Are there any questions in there? Anything else you need to know before you make your decision? Okay, so let's move on though then, and let's figure out how to address Hilda's request.
Jacqueline.
So I guess the main question is, where's my handout here?
I'm sorry, Jacqueline, can you go back to full screen?
Go back to this?
Like full presentation. So
I'm sorry, go back to what?
from current slide up in the left-hand corner. Perfect.
Okay.
And one question that came up in the chat that someone might need to know is, what are Grace's duties?
Grace is, she's also an administrative assistant. She has nothing to do with enrollment. She supports faculty after and students after they have enrolled. So she's not involved in the enrollment process.
Thank you.
You know, I'm going to stop sharing for a second because let me just show the handout. It has the questions. Okay, this I'm going to share instead. Share. So there are two handouts that you're going to get. This is the Venn diagram here, and it has the reflection questions. And then this is the other one that is posted. Whoops.
Everyone, those are posted in the Whova app, and we also just put them in the chat for the people who are on Zoom, so you can get them right there. So they're in both places.
So we need to decide whether we're going to allow Hilda to work remotely.
We have another question that just came up in the chat. Has Hilda ever been presented with enrollment goals, which she needed to?
Yes, as a department, we have enrollment goals, yes.
Okay, and then another one. What has Hilda done to enhance her productivity virtually? What has been offered to her by leadership as professional development?
So in the early days, it was professional development by supporting each other with peer mentors. The college was not in the position to offer formal technology training. So it was we paired a lot of, she was paired with somebody.
Okay, one more that we have. Thanks, everyone. Is Hilda aware that her productivity has decreased significantly?
Yes. Yes. So if you want to chime up with some answers, do you think you would accommodate her request or not? And how does accountability factor into your desire to be empathetic towards Hilda? It's a loaded question. There is no right answer, I promise you. But the idea here is to think about the challenge and use some of the things that you just heard about in your decision-making process. How fair would it be to consider to divide up Hilda's work among others, because the work needs to be done. Feel free to unmute. Any takers? So let's say Hilda is accommodated and Hilda gets to work. Go ahead.
I apologize. We did have somebody who's live who wanted to give a response.
Super.
There's a negative effect on students. Hello. If there's a net negative effect on students, then that would not be a good, I have a hard time with that going. That is not a good situation for students. And if you're there to serve students, then that Hilda should not be allowed to work from home if it has a net negative effect.
Very good point. So with a reduced productivity rate, fewer students would get through the enrollment pipeline if Hilda was not on campus. So that would have a direct impact on students' ability to enroll. Very good point.
We have another answer in the chat, a couple of them. I think
Great.
It's about them both being parents rather than the productivity issue, equity.
Yes, they are both parents. Yep.
And then we have one more. If Hilda knows her productivity is down and she hasn't identified other solutions and the leadership hasn't come up with a plan to increase her skills, then I would think a decision for working virtually could not happen.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
And another one, based on operational needs, a trial period with a definite end date to revisit. If goals and support is lacking, revoke the remote work.
Very good response. Yes. So there you're demonstrating empathy, but you're also setting a timeline for performance improvement or reverting to in-person.
And one question came up: what coaching has been provided to Hilda?
Quite a bit through the Technology Center. Over the years, yes, over the years, there was a lot of support offered.
We had one agreement with the trial period, and then another participant said, I believe based on Hilda's job description, she would need to be more accessible physically. Regardless of her productivity, once students return to campus, her functions require her to be in person. You may suggest an alternative work schedule. Very
good. So as you can see, there's no right answer here, right? And when you're faced with something like this in your, and you have been in your own work situation, there, a lot of it has to do with how you present it. Hilda, we will give you a trial period, and if it doesn't work, we have to go back to the old, the face-to-face. A lot of it will be in the messaging and the tone. There was a lot of support for providing professional development for her and making sure that she has the skills and the abilities to do her job. This is not about ousting her out of her job at all, because she's wonderful with students. It's about supporting her to do her best work. And in times of crisis, we don't always have time. It's not an ideal situation, so there's not ideal optimal PD available and support. So you've got to make a decision based on, you know, where you're at and group dynamics and everything. So thank you for contributing to that. You will get all this that I thought we could do in the breakout room, but it is what it is. So finally, leadership in crisis is not about power, but it's about the privilege of allowing one's influence to best serve others. This falls under the servant leadership kind of theory or model. Leadership in crisis is not about responsibility alone, but it's about taking ownership of a mission that goes well beyond our assigned duties. And we all know that. None of us performed within our job description the past 2 years. Leadership in crisis is not about hierarchy or rank. It's not about being in charge and telling others what to do, but rather how one shows their human side in authentic ways that encourages others to do the same. And this is the modeling piece also. So we're back to our cairn and our gravity, and my final words are take a breath, right? We've been doing this. We've been successful. We may not feel we're successful, and we're doing a lot of things on the fly. We are pivoting, we are churning out ideas, trying them and admitting that they fail. But in the end, we have survived a time none of us would have thought we would have survived a few years ago. So again, here is my contact information. Thank you so much. A lot of different references here, and they will be posted. I will post them on the WOVA, app. Any final questions or comments or?
We did have a couple more answers
Okay.
come in the Whova chat. Did you want me to read them off or just
Sure.
let people take a look? Okay. So
Let me see it.
Hilda's situation may become worse over time with a sick parent. She may need to explore other options like FMLA, as remote work might not even be feasible. So
Yes.
really good points here. I
Very
agree
good.
with the trial period. I would ask her what support she needs to work remotely in a way that's effective. Then schedule periodic check-ins during a trial period and ask her to reflect about her own performance and improvement.
See, I told you, you guys got this.
Yes. Yes. And then someone said too, unfortunately, this is not about childcare. Remote work needs to be about work.
Mhm.
Okay. And those are the comments I see so far. And
Thank
there's
you.
more coming in on the Zoom chat, and they're all thank you, outstanding presentation, thank you, those kind of things. So
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure. I will post everything. Feel free to reach out if you want any additional resources. I really enjoyed that class and doing this research, and I learned a lot. And it was more about awareness than actually getting answers for me.
wonderful, everyone. Well, thank you for attending today's WIOA Summit session. Make sure to continue engagement and networking on the Whova app, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session.
Thank you, Tara. And
Thank
thank
you.
you, Kristen, if you're still there.
Thank you so much, Jack.
Is it safe to log out?
We should be good. Thank you.
Thanks.